Questions. There were a couple of things that just jumped right out. That we learned that pain occurs both in the physical, the spiritual, the financial, and existential. So that when we're looking about how do we ally pain with our patients, let's look at it at that multi-level. We learned about a resource of the Islamic Medical Association of North America. Very often, as caregivers, we're not quite sure where to go. So there are publications, there are resources and information. And that costs, particularly, there are a number of agencies that can assist with the cost of the burial process within the Islamic community. And from the Babalawo, we got a good reminder that the start of end-of-life care actually begins well before. So how are we taking care of our elders or those that are ill? It needs to happen long before they enter into the hospital. And that the world is a marketplace and the true home is heaven. That if this is their belief, we need to help them in that process. And then we need to look at the past and the present and the future in this broader context. And one of the things that we're reminded of, that if we're met by challenges such of cost, that perhaps if we change our ideas, we can simplify and change how we respond to the issues we're confronted with. That we need to assist people where they are, look at their emotions and values, and help them resolve the heartbreak about unfinished business. And that being aware that in each of the faiths, there are different levels of time in terms of how we look at the transition of the soul. So the more we're aware of that, the more we can find ways to incorporate it in the clinical setting. And prayer is crying over the shoulders of the Lord. I think that just, that just fed my spirit right there. That when we pray, that we're helping, that they're crying over the affairs, and that the role that charity plays in helping relieving the transition and making it easier for the dying person. So I think those are things that I'm going to hold when I leave, and I suggest as ways you can hold as well. And now I'd like to open the floor to any questions. And if you have questions, feel free to come to the mic. It's a portable mic. So, there's a mic right there. Use that mic stand.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation, all four of you. My name is Kei Okada from Visiting Nurse Service in New York, Hospice Palliative Care, and I work as spiritual care counselor. Some people, they are afraid of death or just difficulty grasping the idea of becoming non-existent, or so people use different language, but the more people I encounter, the fear is not so much about the death, but the more like what will happen in the process until I die, the question of suffering. And my question for you is, in face of suffering, somehow I feel it's so sacred and beyond our cognitive understanding. So I feel I enter into something beyond what is verbal. So I cannot explain out suffering for the people who are suffering. But when you face someone whose pain, physical discomfort, disease symptoms are just so persistent, and they say, what's happening, why? For the people of faith might say, is God punishing me? Have I done something wrong? But people who don't believe in God, they say, can I just end this suffering? And I just want to learn more from you. How would you approach this presence of suffering? Thank you.
Thank you very much for, I think, very interesting questions. The two things that I did not touch upon is during the end of life. One of is the fear of being abandoned. From a physician's perspective, will my doctor not care about anymore? And that happens, and we have to be concerned about in the hospice setting. I've served as a medical director of a hospice, and that issue comes up. Who's going to care for me? Is my primary doctor going to continue, or the medical director of the hospice will care for me? Who will care for me? So Abandonment is a real concern that is not expressed, but we need to, as professionals or the caregivers, have to make sure that patient is never abandoned. From a medical point of view, treatment never stops. It's not chemotherapy, it is some other kind of a treatment. Even if it's just holding the hand and being there, that's a treatment. So we never use the word, or at least I encourage my juniors, don't say that we are stopping the treatment, or we are stopping this, because that is some sort of a metaphor to just quitting and not doing anything. There's no such thing as we are not doing something. We're always doing something. So that's important. The other concept that we have not talked about is the fear of being a burden, particularly towards the terminal illness. Most of the people feel that they are burdened on their spouses, they are burdened on their children, either physically or financially. So those two issues have also to be addressed in any way that we can in reducing that fear. So there are lots of fears, and a lot of them are very personal based on their own life stories. But some of these things that we can identify, we need to address.
Does anyone else wish to address?
It's a very good question. There's no intellectual way to answer. I'm reflecting on the visits I made on the floors of Calvary where I could not speak. I just walked into a room and I was trained to be present. You go to the deepest spiritual core of your being, you're channeling God Almighty, and you'll just be there for the patient. Sometimes just the warmth of a touch, a smile, maybe it's not a smile at all, it's just you being there and going with the flow. If you believe you have intuition, you'll go by what you're directed to projecting love and compassion. Yes, that's a given, but there are other things you might have to do. In some cases, if I felt the need to use sense of humor, and if I got a response from that, that was the healing. Other times I've had confessions where the next day my friend made the transition and they wanted to just download 40 years of confession to me. So again, it's probably nonverbal, and it's your opportunity to be as close to the Creator as you can, to be there for the person.
Just to say, reaffirmation of the faith, I think, helps the most in relieving this greatest fear of what's going to happen to me. The more faithful you are, the less you are afraid, because it is the faith that gives you that enormous strength, not just physically, but spiritually. And you know this is the end of it. I mean, nothing to be worried about. We came here for a purpose. God has finished our purpose. Now we go back to the Lord. I think that thought can only come if you have the faith. And I think as caregivers, spiritual leaders, or even physicians, if they can, must continue to reinforce that faith. And of course, in Hinduism, we also believe continuous chanting of the prayers, mantras, japas, and then playing some music, all in the praise of the Lord. It just soothes the mind and continues to bring back the saying that here I am, now I'm going to be in the hands of the Lord. I think that's the best way to go.
Now I almost forgot what I'm supposed to say. I think that this faith is important. I want to add something to it. Not everybody is religious, so earlier I hinted that the help comes from the patient themselves, and we're there to empower it. So whatever, because sick and disease, everybody dies, everybody gets old, and not all have it. But they have their own version of confidence. And whether they're Christian or Jew or Buddhist or Hindus, that we know that. But then there are other half of it have nothing. But they have still something as human beings. Faith is something we teach them, but then there are people who are not taught, but they have their own ideas. Our role is to, to empower, to make it that strong. That's one thing I like to point it out, just so that everybody's included in the concern, especially in your work. The other thing is that I just want to pass quickly, There's a Tibetan book of death and dying is good. There's a Tibetan book of death, as in Tibetan war is all about dying and death, of course. And that's something, in case you want to read this, immense information right there.
Okay, another question? Do we have a question? Questions?
Okay, just a quick comment. Is that all right?
Quick.
Yes.
Okay.
I just came from a home that is not.
It's on.
Yes, and a home. Father is 92 years old, and he was taken to the hospital, and they said that he has to have two or three of his arteries are blocked. So him being 92 years, he says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to come home, and I'm going to pray. And if I go in these moments, it's the best way, rather than having to go and just continue life for the sake of life. And I'm very nervous because I'm standing in front of a very powerful doctor. Dr. Mazrek, and she delivered two boys a while ago in the late 70s. And to hear her speak about that. But there's one thing I want to make specifically, that what defines spirituality. Because a lot of people are confused about that, and the word is used very randomly. Spirituality is after we make all our efforts as humans, reading our scriptures, listening to the holy men, pray, and then God takes over. From that point is called spirituality. So at that point in time, we need to meditate, and we have the self-strength and confidence that we are the resources, and we are in direct relationship with God. So that is spirituality, and we have to be very careful that when we use that word, it should not be intertwined with religion. It should be, they're two separate things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that's a good reminder. I see a hand coming up. Question?
It's a very quick.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Because I want to make sure the questions get answered, and then hold the comment, okay? But don't forget it. Don't be like me. Question?
I'm glad that it was everybody hear me? I don't know.
Yes.
That it was a clarification in terms of the issue of faith. My question pertains to when my husband, Tony, was going through the chaplaincy, I was his caregiver when he came home because of everything that he was going through the day. One of the things that he shared with me was that often at the time that the person is getting ready, they're also taking care of their family because they're concerned about their family. And sometimes they're not fearful. They're more fearful for their family. But also the concern that I had based on his experiences, and I had seen it happen, is that sometimes people take the opportunity when they are with that person to convert. The issue of conversion to particular faith. And that gets played out. And my question to the panelists, and I have heard some answers already, what do you think about that?
Okay, does someone wish to address that? And I mean, I've had that experience. Does anybody wish to?
May I?
It won't bias, but you know. Yeah, you can answer it. I mean, I've encountered it on a number of occasions, so.
I'll be very brief, and I'll tell the story.
Talk loud so we can hear you, baby.
Okay, can you hear me?
Talk a little louder.
Hey. All right.
And then, before you start, the young lady who had a comment, could you come up to the mic so we can keep it moving and be on time? All right, we're about to close.
A gentleman was this close. You get me? This close. And a priest from the chaplain's office went upstairs. He was African from Nigeria, Catholic. And he walked in and he was going to administer the last rites within the Catholic.
Sacrament of the Sick.
That's correct. And convert our friend to accept Jesus Christ. and he was very genuine about it. The gentleman who was this close got up and out of bed. He's from Trinidad, and a person of the African traditional religion from Trinidad, the Shango. He got up, he sat up, his eyes wide, and he made it a very clear point. He did not want to have that last rite administered to him. So that blew the priest right out of the room, and he ran down to the pastoral care office. My supervisor, Reverend Carlos Alejandro, went upstairs and said some prayers in the traditional African way. And the gentleman calmed down with this smile on his face, laid down and basically said, "Thank you, I'm going." And had one of those peaceful transitions that people in the pastoral
I think there's an interesting point that's very important, and I've encountered it, which is why I ended up doing so many studies in multi-faith and interfaith studies. That we have to respect the patient as where they are at the moment that we encounter them. They have made their decisions and it's their journey. And so we need to honor that, and then that's why we're sharing the resources and information. Because if they indicate to you that they are of a faith or spiritual practice, and it is not one that is yours, call us, call the resources. We can assist, we can help, but not impose what our particular perspective or point of view is on. I have found that on a number of occasions, just by honoring where they are, that it actually does ease some of the challenge of suffering, because you have family members who are saying, but I raised you such and such, and we want you to go this way, and there's that family struggle. And one of the roles we can play is to be the mediator and to help them have the transition in the way that they are. One of the ways and things that you can suggest to people, but particularly before they even go in the hospital, one thing that we've done in our family, we were all raised as 5 children as Episcopalians, but as we became adults, we had different paths to our journey. I have an older brother who's Hindu, a sister who's a born-again she's Baptist. One is a bit agnostic. I myself have accepted Islam about almost 50 years ago. We each have a journal with full instructions about what our wishes are, so that, and each of our children, so my children who are raised Muslim, I have clear instructions of who should take care of me, including even my ex-husband, because I honor him as an imam and a scholar. And so it's clear. And I think that when you can get people to do that, when you do that yourself, I don't think too many of you have done that. Before you can really help out in this process, you have to have done this for yourself first. And then what the patient will see in your eyes is your own clarity and your way to embrace it. Young lady wanted to make a closing comment.
Can I just make one comment?
Okay. One from the panel, then the young lady, and then I think we can be on time.
Yeah,
the marshal's standing in the back.
I just concur with what you said. Also, my experience with a couple of patients where at the end of their lives there was an attempt at certain other things that was not so pleasant. And now, in fact, that has made me think that the caregivers, including whether they're spiritual or even physicians, need to go through some courses, like CME courses, because it's important for them to understand how crucial this is. That last moment, whether it be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half hour, 1 hour, is extraordinarily crucial for the person who's dying, and the person who can give the most comfort cannot be defeating that purpose. Thank you.
Young lady, you had a closing comment?
Can I just add on to just one line? As a physician, it's always been very challenging to answer the question, how much time there is. And we don't have the answer to that. Of course, this is something in God's hand. However, reading a medical journal a couple of days ago, a group of palliative care physicians and hospice care physicians and clinicians have come up with some sort of an algorithm in which they have divided the symptoms of the patient And by categorizing that, you can then enumerate and say that maybe within 3 days or perhaps 3 to 7 days. And it is always very difficult. I mean, there are certain things that I, as 30 years of experience, can sort of try to predict. But this is always a very difficult question to answer by the clinicians as to how much time there is, because certain things have to be done, planning has to be done. But that tool may become available. Whether or not it has been clinically validated yet, I don't know. I'm going to contact them and see if I can get more information about this thing. But this is always a difficult question to answer. But I absolutely agree with you. We have to prepare ourselves before we talk to our patients or to, I have my advance directives, and I'm going to put a pitch in here. If any one of you does not have your own advance directives, talk to me. I'll help you sign it. You don't need a lawyer. It can be easily done. But we need to think through, be prepared, and have that emotional strength so that we can talk to others. If we haven't done it and we have not dealt with the issues at the end of our lives, then it's very difficult to do it with others. I'm sorry to take you.
No, that's all right.
Thank you.
Just a really brief thing. There's a beautiful film that was made in 2008 called Departures. It's a Japanese film, and I highly recommend it to people. It's just very, very beautiful about honoring the dead body and dealing with families and issues, and it's just, I recommend it.
Okay, so we've been given a wide range of information this afternoon. The bottom line thing is that with all the different faiths or manifestations of faith, not all of them have a God in their tradition, but there are core principles and values that we need to respect and honor. The human being is in front of us. But before we can give any care to anyone else, we need to give care to ourselves first. When we are compassionate and love ourselves, when we are sincere in our own concept of how we relate to death and dying, then we can fully serve the men and women that are brought to us. And it's a blessing indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.